All right, and our next presenter, the second keynote of the day, is Jaime Bestard, who is the Chief Engineer, Digital Mission Architecture, Department of Defense.
All right. Thank you so much, Aurelius. Welcome back. I hope you've all had a pleasant lunch, and I hope I do not put all of you to sleep. I know it's nap time in some places, so hopefully that'll be good. So as Aurelius said, I'm Jaime Bestard. I'm the Chief Engineer for Digital Mission Architectures over in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. So the first thing that I'd like to do is I'll start showing you our mission and where I sit, so that you can get a better understanding of the problems we face and why we come to this community to seek help and to help us with our mission. First of all, work for the Department of Defense. You've heard our keynote speaker earlier today, Mr. Eggers. He highlighted the work he does for the Department of the Air Force. So we are all the same team, same department. And what we do is you provide forces to deter war primarily. And if we ever have to go to war, to ensure our nation's security. So that's our top mission across the entire department. Within our enterprise, if you will, our research and engineering enterprise, the name says it, right? We develop advanced capabilities, advanced systems, advanced technology so that our forces can prevail and overpower our adversaries if needed. And then within the Office of the Undersecretary, that's where I sit. Within the Office of the Undersecretary, we have the Director for Mission, or the Office for Mission Capabilities. Our role is basically getting technologies from the labs, things that are fairly advanced, experimenting with them, trying them out, figuring out what tactics can be employed, how they can be employed operationally, taking them out to the folks that are going to be using these technologies, and making sure that they are going to be useful for the broader department's mission before they transition out. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel these, sorry. Before they transition out of the research and engineering enterprise into our procurement or into the field and get employed. So that's, in a nutshell, our high-level organizational mission. If I go to the next slide. All right, so organizationally, I report to Mr. Elmer Roman, and he's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Mission Integration. And that's basically my chain of command all the way to the president. And I'll talk a little bit about mission integration and how we are helping mission capabilities transition technologies using some of the work that's done in the Unified Architecture Framework. So first of all, I want to set the ground, put everyone at the same level. So mission engineering, what is it? So that's what we use to make our mission integration efforts a reality. And basically, it's not just, a lot of people think that when we talk about mission engineering, we're talking about modeling and simulation, constructive simulations, running airplanes flying, submarines underwater, you're time-stepping everything, and you're figuring out how far they can fly, do they impact the mission, and so on. But it's not only that. And my boss likes to foot stomp that a lot by highlighting that mission engineering has an element of architecture built into it, right? So the objective is not necessarily to figure out how, what we say in our lingo, how a widget works, right? A device, how it would work in the field, and how much it changes the mission. Now, the reality is, how do we engineer missions effectively with what we have in the field, with what we are developing, and if there's anything we need, go back to the laboratories and to the companies that are supporting us so that they can build those new widgets. But really look from the mission first, try to accomplish that, and then walk back to see how new capabilities can help us accomplish that mission more effectively. So to do that, we have a process. It's captured in our mission engineering guide. And that process from left to right, you can see here, it is from left to right. So you start with our mission problem. We characterize the mission. We try to understand what we are doing in the field in terms of operational plans, what the enemy is trying to do, because they're also trying to accomplish a mission. We characterize that mission and we start capturing what needs to be accomplished in terms of metrics. Say that you need to strike a set of targets. How soon do you need to do that? How quickly? How effectively do you need to do that? Can you launch multiple things at it? Are you constrained by any dependencies, treaty dependencies? Think about rules of engagement, but also technological dependencies. Do you have data, access to information? When we are in a combat environment, adversaries are trying to make sure that you cannot communicate and so on. So all those dependencies that go away, we try to capture that and then start building metrics that tell us, hey, this is what you need to accomplish at the mission level, and all these systems need to work together to get to that objective. And then we start building those mission architectures, which we divvy out in between mission threads and mission engineering threads. So the dichotomy there between mission threads and mission engineering threads is that the mission thread is going to tell you a set of tasks that you're trying to accomplish. And the mission engineering threads are going to have the performers added to those tasks. So when you start seeing baselines and alternatives, we look at our baseline. How can we accomplish that with fielded capabilities, things that we already have in the field, organizations, how they are structured today, personnel, their current proficiency using those capabilities, and so on. And then you start looking at new technologies, new organizational structures, new, assuming that you're going to have access to certain bases, et cetera, et cetera. All those things, we start capturing that into an alternative and then seeing, hey, this new technology really does make a difference. But, oh, by the way, it has all these other dependencies that we need to capture. And then we work hand in hand with our constructive simulation folks to make sure that we're not dreaming these things up, that when you run it through a simulation, that these things actually do work how they are supposed to. Now, so that's all model-based, constructively, et cetera. We also work with the folks that are doing experimentation, exercises. Those are also simulations. The fact that they are live or virtual in some cases with a man and unmanned or a man and virtual teaming and so on doesn't make them any less of a simulation. They're still simulations. So again, all of that is captured, and the architectures that we build become the backbone of that entire analysis process. That information gets fed back into the architectures, and it helps us provide results, recommendations to senior leaders. So that's basically mission engineering in a nutshell. On the right, you'll see some of the tools that we use for that. We use Cameo, like many of you. We also use some data visualization tools for our constructive side to make sure that we are relaying the correct information to leadership and that they can make decisions effectively. They're not just seeing a bunch of boxes and arrows, et cetera. They're seeing something that makes sense to them and that they can relate to. So that's what we do in a nutshell. So I'm always asked, why do we need to do digital mission architectures? Why do you even exist, right? So I think some of the earlier briefers, they ask, they talk about Congress, and Congress is always asking, so what? You're improving the performance of things, so what, right? So mission architectures, they help us with a disciplined approach to analyze capability gaps, right? It's rigorous, it's repetitive, et cetera. But not only that, right? They provide us with a model-based representation of our doctrine, organization, training, material. So material, what we mean by that is bellic, right? War-fighting materials, equipment, and so on. Leadership and education, personnel, facilities, policy dependencies. So we call that, in the Department of Defense, we call that the .mlpf. It's a mouthful, but it's basically all the aspects that we need to consider when we are building technology. It's not just delivering a widget. It's showing all the dependencies that widget has to rely on to accomplish a mission. But not only that, right? So the mission architectures, they provide a descriptive visualization of advanced technology and capabilities that we develop in a mission context. They also help us understand mission pedigree, model pedigree, right? Where is the information on our threats coming from? What's the quality of that information? What about the blue systems, right? Sometimes we understand our enemies better than we understand our own selves. Am I talking to the person that's really building that widget, or am I talking to the person that it's 3 layers removed from it? They also act, as I mentioned earlier, as a repository for mission data and related measures. So as capabilities evolve from the lab through this constructive, simulated environment to the exercises, to test and evaluation, they're rigorously tested, et cetera. These mission architectures function also as a repository for test data and so on that we can transition through the life cycle of these systems. And ultimately, they are, like I said, the backbone for federation and integration across various functional communities. I've heard folks talk about dependencies on the financial communities, contracting, et cetera. Mission architectures help those communities relate to this is what we're trying to accomplish. And we need to do all these efforts within this time frame, et cetera, to accomplish that mission. If we don't do that, it doesn't happen. Policy, we need to have basing rights in this country, or we need to limit the ability of our adversaries to gain basing rights in those nations, et cetera. And ultimately, the whole idea is informing key defense policy and capability investment decisions, major decisions that we do across the department. So as I mentioned earlier, how we do that, it's we do mission characterization, right? So we look, missions can be accomplished at all levels of warfare, okay? You waking up in the morning and getting off bed and fixing your bed as an Army soldier, that's a mission right there. Doing your training, that's also a mission. But you also have missions in terms of reaching out to your allies, theater strategy, working with partners, establishing national policy. All those things are missions in themselves. There's planning components to those, et cetera. There's also at the tactical level, right? At the very much, things are shooting each other, you're engaging each other, et cetera. So we capture them at all levels, and we capture those interdependencies with architectures. There are different terminologies that we've established in our mission engineering guide, and I highly recommend folks in this room read that if they're interested in conducting mission engineering, so that we are all speaking the same lingo when we are talking about mission engineering. Ultimately, some of the sources we use, as I mentioned, there is defense planning scenarios, a joint force operating scenarios. Those are things that we produce that tell us, in 5 years, this is how we intend to fight. So that's part of the first step of our process. The second step comes to us on our mission architectures, and you start seeing more familiar representations or examples of products that come from my office. Some of the things, we start going from mission level, measures of success, and that's how we start really capturing the mission. We love, in the Department of Defense, we love to use the dynamic targeting kill chain. And I will tell you, that's not the only kill chain or the only business process or anything like that that's available. I mean, the folks that were briefing, the gentleman that was talking about John Deere and the job that they're trying to do, they're probably not thinking about engaging a target and killing their farm, or, they want to produce milk. So, but I mean, for us, it's basically fixing a target, tracking it, making a decision who has to engage it and so on, and then going after it, taking it out or disabling it, and then figuring out, is it really disabled? Can we really do all these other missions and all these other operations that we need to carry out? So to do that, you need to establish measures of success and so on, and that's really what drives the entire mission engineering process. And we go down to another level and we start looking at the activity, who's going to be doing that, who's going to be classifying contacts, who's going to be receiving process signals and so on. And that's how we start building our mission architectures. So that's just one example, again, also on our mission engineering guide. So the reason I'm here really, I'm starting to use this chart now. So the Department of Defense is, I'm going to give you a little bit of inside ball. The Department of Defense is a huge enterprise. It's a huge federation, okay? So you see the seal for the Department of Defense at the top. Every single one of those seals below, it's a major enterprise. And some of them are contained within those enterprises, right? So from left to right, top, you're going to have the Office of the Secretary of Defense. You're going to have the Joint Staff. So where I sit, these are folks that are top left that are doing primarily force design early on, trying to figure out what missions we need to accomplish, how do we need to do them, etc. As we move down below and to the right, you start going into the services. And I know Mr. Eggers earlier on touched on the Air Force's enterprise. You see the Air Force listed there as a department, but the Air Force is composed of two services, two uniform services, the actual United States Air Force and the United States Space Force now. So those are two huge enterprises whose sole responsibility is to organize, train, and equip our forces. What that means is that they are not only building widgets, but they are also putting them in the hands of our military, and they're training our forces, and they are organizing them so that they can present them to the folks on the right. So these are the combatant commands, right? So these are the folks that are going ahead and doing force employment today, right? If we had to go to war, these are the folks that have combatant command. Big enterprise. And what I tell folks, and I think most people in this room are going to relate to, all of us have been to IKEA. And we get our IKEA furniture, and we get our boxes, and they come with instructions. Not very good sometimes, but good enough, right? Well, I get a bunch of IKEA boxes from each of these major enterprises. And in a lot of cases, they do not come with instructions. And I have to put them together to present them to leadership, right? So how do we do that? How are we doing that? We started last summer, meeting across the entire department with the government, trying to figure out, hey, Air Force, you're doing these. Navy, you're also doing great work, but for the Navy. So let's look at what you guys have. Let's see how we put it together. And my boss, Mr. Roman, who you saw earlier, his picture right next to mine, he signed a memo in October based on recommendations from that workshop. And I think a lot of you folks were in that meeting. I think Matt, I see some familiar faces that were sitting at that meeting. But there were three key items, right? The first thing was exploring and trying to figure out, we all have repositories across the entire department. Air Force has one, Joint Staff has another one. We have our own stuff. Who's authoritative for what purpose? Who do we talk to? Who do we get data from? And really, let's put a central repository in place that we can all use and at least point us in the right direction. So that was the first objective that he established. He also asked us to stand up a digital mission architecture collaboration group, which looks across the entire defense enterprise. And then he told us, use two specific use cases. And those are blacked out there because of the nature of these events. But basically, those two use cases are going to help us walk through the process of integrating and federating across the department. And lastly, develop a style guide that supports our mission engineering guide. So our mission engineering guides will tell you the whole top-level process. It won't tell us how to do mission architectures, per se. Everybody has a different definition of how to do that. So OSD R&E has taken it upon itself to build one that we're going to share with the entire department. And then part of it is evaluating the use of the Unified Architecture Framework as the profile that we use for enterprise architecting and enterprise mission architecting. So that's basically the guidance that we have in terms of integration for FY24. There's a lot of guidance too in terms of the studies that we support. So we have full-time jobs. This is pretty much an additional duty for us, but we have to do it to do our full-time job more effectively. So this is where we are. A few things that I wanted to highlight to these at this event is that we've already captured style guides across the entire department and beyond. Okay, we've participating in various workshops and events, NDIA, different fora that we've discussed requirements, the synergies that we need to establish to make this happen. We already have some draft guidance. I have some of my team sitting here, and they're making very valuable contacts at these events. But the whole idea is that that guidance facilitates a uniform development and presentation model for the entire department, that our community, the folks on the Intel side, the folks on at the services, the military departments can use. And when I get models, they are not coming from IKEA, from different IKEAs. So so one of the things actually that we're working through right now, it's using useful examples. A lot of folks have seen the search and rescue example. You'll see a briefing from Matt talking about Darth Vader and the Battle of Hoth. So that's I love that example, by the way. It really showcases the power of a unified architecture framework in terms of mission engineering. But we're really, Desert Storm, happened when a lot of the folks in this room weren't even born. Some of us were very young. So a lot of that stuff has been declassified and we can use it for historical examples. So we are using that as an example of things that go boom at the end, and how do we use it in the department? We started with the Task Force Normandy historical example, and we're expanding to make sure that SysML examples are used, showcased, and folks have a good reference to work on. A few things way forward. We're currently undergoing some of the internal review processes, people putting comments on our architecture style guide. And then our next thing, hopefully before summer really kicks in, is to share the draft with the broader community and the department, do the formal staffing. We work in DoD after all, and it's a big bureaucracy, as you saw earlier. So we do have to staff things and make sure that we are not catching people by surprise. But the intent is in FY25, which our fiscal years start in October, so the 1st of October, we are ready to hit the ground running, and I can go to the various stakeholders and tell them, hey, I need an architecture for this specific mission from the Navy, and I need one from the Army, and here's your style guide, here's your tasking, I need your answers in 2 months, use UAF and use SysML to build those, get them back to us by this date, and then instead of us rushing and trying to reinvent what the services have done at OSD, we'll just get it from the horse's mouth, integrate it, which the name of our office says it all, Mission Integration. So we would integrate and then use it for analysis, which usually kick off some decision processes and decision cycles in January. So we have really like 3 months to build all these models, get them all packaged nicely, present them to leadership, and make sure that they understand how many gaps, the gaps that we have, that they're quantified, where we can invest to develop new technologies and advanced capabilities, and what's the most reasonable way forward, right, in terms of their decision levels. The intent, like I said, publishing this by September, getting it out to the community so people have their marching orders and how to do it. They have instructions. So that's where we are today. I highlighted a few things here. You've seen this chart a million times, I'm sure. But this is something that we're using for our team, and I plagiarized that from Matt House and I think James Martin's slide decks. So I plagiarized this because it really highlights that we don't need to build the entire UAF architecture when we're doing mission engineering. We really have to focus on these areas, and it really showcases, some of the things that really resonate with our leadership, with our policy folks, and with our other stakeholders. So think, we need basing rights. We need classified information flowing in between systems at different levels. What impact, if I cannot secure basing rights in a certain location, what impact is that going to have in my ability to carry out a certain mission? Those are things that you can have the most exquisite technology coming from our shop, right? Coming from DARPA, coming from the defense laboratories. You can have the nicest thing that if you cannot take off and launch that technology or get it in the air or in the water because your ally doesn't let you or your partner doesn't let you, those are policy implications that you're just on the ground. You cannot accomplish a mission just the same as if your technology couldn't accomplish a mission. So those things, the unified architecture framework and these this community really is helping us understand the dependencies, the relationships, and do it in an organized and reasonable, methodical approach. The other thing is, technology roadmaps, how things evolve through the acquisitions lifecycle, all those things capturing the entire architecture. And the beauty of this is that we don't need to do everything. We only need to do a certain portion of it. So love it. Here are a few examples built in Cameo of how we're doing our mission threads and our mission engineering threads. So we go from top left, where you're looking, as I mentioned earlier, mission thread, what are you trying to accomplish in terms of tasks, finding, fixing, tracking, etc. And then you also have what we call our order of battle. What capabilities do you have fielded? What units do you have that are able to accomplish this mission? In some cases, a capability can be an F-15, it can be an F-35. I'm sure that you guys are familiar with the Joint Strike Fighter. It can be some of those Gucci fancy, aircraft and ships and stuff like that. And it can also be an operations center. It can be a battalion, an Army battalion. It can be so many things, right? So that's part of our order of battle, understanding what forces we have in the field. And then we put all of those together into your RSPR view, which shows you that activity performer relationship. So that's what we call our mission engineering thread. The next thing we do, really, after we build our relations and we start building the logic there, etc., which, by the way, all of these, all the wording there and everything, it's usually based on specific language that the department uses in its doctrine. So, for example, to accomplish an ISR mission, you have a series of steps that are already captured. These are called joint function task lists or JCITLs and so on. We have a bunch of acronyms for things, but basically defined list of tasks that we need to accomplish. So the semantics and the, I don't know if I want to use that word here, the ontology, don't want to use that word here. So the semantics are all the same. Our joint staff does a really good job of capturing that, and we just replicate that, reuse that in our models. But yeah, all those missions are fairly defined, and then you start putting in performance, right? Once we build our baselines and our models, we need to present them to leadership so that they understand, hey, this is how we are accomplishing the mission today. So this is a very simplistic example of how we do that. We call these end-to-end views, and these are fit for purpose, right? So we use them to brief leadership. They usually go with a PowerPoint overlay that tells a story. Hey, usually things are happening from left to right. In many cases, there is flows of information back and forth. So for example, on this one, you're seeing that your Intel source is transferring an Intel update to the coalition Air Operations Center, and that Air Operations Center is deciding, hey, is this a real threat, and sending that what we call weapon quality tracks to the Airborne Command and Control, the E3 in the air, that basically decides who's going to be shooting, who's going to be supporting, etc., and trying to accomplish that mission. That's also coming directly from that Desert Storm example. And then you have all the performers there, including the weapons that they have and so on, and your target sites. We do the same thing for Red. Red is also trying to do a mission on us. So we understand those interdependencies between Red and Blue and allies and so on. And then we continue with building sequence diagrams and so on. But really what gets presented to leadership is these end-to-end views. And the way they get presented to leadership, again, very simplistic, is we show that baseline at the top that tells you the whole story of, who's launching, they're taking off at this time of the day, and so on and so forth. And it highlights, we do overlays that highlight some of the vulnerable paths that we have, for example, in this specific mission. Again, fit for purpose. So whoever is presenting this to leadership has to do a little bit of work and clean these up. It's not just a bunch of boxes and lines. It's telling a story that leadership can say, okay, well, that's orange, that's bad. So sorry if there's anyone here that's colorblind, but orange and green on the left is fairly good, right? Green with double lines, resilient path. Good, right? So then we come in with a new alternative. In this case, a fielded technology. It doesn't have to be something new. But in this case, a fielded capability, so a communications relay that would basically add redundancy to our communications path. And that's basically where we tell folks, hey, if you invest in this capability, this is what you're going to get in terms of the architecture. And oh, by the way, your mission is going to be more robust. Your risk to accomplishing the overall mission is going to decrease significantly by these amounts. And those amounts come from our constructive simulation side and our operations research side. So a few things on the contents. The mission architecture guide will teach you how to go over order of battle, how to present it, mission threads, and so on, all those views that I showed earlier. Sorry. Some of the things that we are working still to capture is the measures and conditions and behaviors. How do we implement that in the architecture consistently across the department? Remember, when you're looking at the entire enterprise, you have space systems, you have air systems, you have surface, maritime systems, ground systems, you have undersurface systems, you have personnel. How do you do that effectively, and how do you capture those behaviors across the board? So we're still battling with that. This is probably going to be the first iteration into a living document that gets updated as we learn more and more. But the intent is to build all these measures, to model all of these, so that we can immediately, as someone was mentioning earlier, I think it was James or some of the earlier briefers, so that we can support the constructive simulation side of the house automatically, seamlessly, kind of go from the descriptive, Cameo-based, SysML, UAF, to AFSIM models, NGTS, you name your simulation that you're interested in running, Simulink, MATLAB, you name it, right? How do we go from this descriptive representation to the actual simulation without having to do a lot of scripting and coding? The other part is, you can still do a lot of analysis on these architectures. You can quantify risk, automate that process. You can do nodal analysis and so on. So we've done some of that in prior studies within R&E. We're going to start with those examples, codifying those. But I think there is so much more power to having these machine-readable models that will really enable us to present to leadership a complete picture of, hey, if I put this money into these, it really changes the overall picture, or this group of capabilities and things. And oh, by the way, I need to change my doctrine, I need to change my organization, so that it fits this new technology that we're fielding. The other thing is, working with our Intel brethren and security folks to make sure that we capture classification guidance, that there is a good set of instructions on capturing references, that they can be pointed at directly, confidence level in the sources of data. And then some of the things we're finding is that modularity is key, right? So we are not the experts at any single thing. We're the experts at integration. So just how to federate, we're working that out and putting recommendations through the document. So in summary, I would say that mission architectures, like I mentioned, and I hope everybody gleaned that. I know it's right after lunch, but they are foundational to how we do advanced technology development and how we evaluate, and more importantly, how we transition and field those capabilities. And that model-based, so the work that we do, model-based mission threats, support our constructive side, our constructive modeling and simulation side of the house. Today, we do that on a fairly ad hoc manual basis, but the goal, the objective, and the vision is to get there automatically as much as possible, so that you remove the human element, the error, the debugging, etc., and that we can do analysis faster. And then, as I said, our office, one of the things I want to foot stomp is that we are leading efforts across the entire department, and people are looking a lot at us in how we are integrating model-based mission architectures from various sources and making them available to the entire community. So with that, I will leave you on this page so that you can have my contact information. And I think this briefing will be shared with the folks in this room, but you have a few links in terms of training that the Department of Defense offers. MITRE also has some training that we've used, and some of the references that I highlighted, like the Mission Engineering Guide and some of the Mission Engineering overviews that we provide. As I said, if you need to reach me, if you have any questions, please, you can contact me, or I can put you in touch with some of the folks in my team. So over to you, Elias, for questions.
Yes.
Hi, William Glasgow with Tailored Access. Just a couple of things. Want to give another plug to suggest the strategy markup language to herd the cats.
Yep.
It's a machine readable standard. It's been out there for a while. I was hoping that you could tell us, without disclosing any absolute values for expectations, what are some of the mission metrics that you're hoping to achieve, assuming success. So when I say that, I mean, let's say for every day you might have 20,000 mission hours that are logged, right? If you go and look at people's records that allow them to get their badges and things like that. How much of what actually occurs, whether or not it's in training on the range, like a red flag or something, or out at sea with an ally, versus you quote will hopefully have represented in some of these artifacts here. So it's like maybe 10% of what actually happens
So
at that level. I mean, can you, because it seems like, you aren't going to be
yeah, so I will tell you that in terms of scenarios, we don't boil the ocean. We are looking at key missions. Yeah, without going to specifics, it's a little bit hard. Yeah, I will just kill it because without going to specifics, I would say 20% of an overall campaign, but it's that key 20% that really is captured in the overall campaign modeling that will make the difference. So we model it at a higher level of detail and then we pass it on. But yeah, I won't say that we're boiling the ocean. We're not capturing the entire campaign. Now with this integration effort, the goal is to capture more of the entire campaign and dependencies. All right. So again, I'm sorry, it's a hard question to answer at this level.
It looks like Mike Enlow from online had a question. Mike, do you want to go ahead and ask the question you put in the chat window?
Say that again.
Mike Enlow is online, and I'm wondering if Mike wants to unmute and ask the question that he put in the chat window.
Sure, I can. Hey, Jaime, how you doing? Mike Yellow, supporting Air Combat Command. Do you see mission engineering being conducted at an operational level of war by, like the requirement sponsors, combatant commands, component staffs, things like that?
So we do that in a fairly ad hoc basis today, right? And folks are doing mission engineering at various levels for different purposes. I think you guys are doing it at Air Combat Command. I think a lot of folks are doing it across the entire department. Our problem is that at the joint level, we do not have a joint, we have an Air Force picture or we have a Navy picture of a very specific mission that they're trying to accomplish, but not necessarily an overall department level. So that's where, the enterprise and the joint missions come into play. Does that answer your question?
Sir, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Clay Delaplane with the United States Transportation Command. As you move forward to your cataloging of mission threads and missions across the DoD, and as we move towards unifying standards, will you guys be directive in what you request of us in terms of lexicons? Because you mentioned UJITLs earlier, right? We have 13 different types of activity lists across the DoD. To provide that standardization. Will you be directive of that?
Yes. Okay. So that's the full intent. I hate the game that a lot of people play saying that, we're not going to be prescriptive. I need some level of prescription in order to do my job. Otherwise, it's just that IKEA scenario that I showed that I did.
And do you anticipate doing that across not just mission threads, but systems as well? So defense business systems versus JSID systems versus other things. And then the other follow-up question,
I'm Jen Barnes. I'm the chief architect.
Excellent.
So, as I was, up more. Ooh. Okay, so as you were going through your brief, I kept thinking a couple of things. One, when are we going to sunset DODAF? Because right now there's a JADC2 effort going on, and the reference architectures are using DODAF. So, we want to transition to UAF because it just makes sense, right? You don't build 28 models, right, for a JITIC package. And I know I'm probably throwing a lot of acronyms out, so I apologize. So I think the big thing for me is the consistency that I don't think we necessarily have, as well as getting the right people to participate. What I do?
Go. Yeah, I want that number too.
And then I was also wondering, we use the tool TMT, right? So as I'm sitting here watching this, I'm thinking, I'm the chief architect of Transcom. I didn't see this, nor
Yep.
did I see the, participation in a digital engineering working group. And I think our brethren here, joint staff, the same thing with some of their efforts with CJSA too. So how do we improve the messaging that it just doesn't go to the operational community? Because most of your architects, I think, are kind of in the J6
Yep.
of any service.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we learned through this integration effort, that that big chart that I had with a bunch of organizations. So some of the use cases were very applicable to your organization, and we didn't get anything from Transcom going through the whole process. So yep.
You're right, sir, we did not.
Yeah, so that's one of the lessons learned, that we need to do a better job of reaching out to the entire department, and we'll talk more offline. So.
All right, one more question.
All right, just to follow up on her question in reference to sunsetting DODAF. If the department is sunsetting this program, what does that do for the rest of the government agencies?
That's an interesting question. So I was very focused on defense here, but I think you brought up a similar question earlier on when Mr. Eggers was briefing. We do talk to other government agencies, and that's where the value, DODAF and where we are with DODAF today, I cannot speak to when we will make the formal leap into UAF, but I think we're moving in that direction. And I think this is a key part of that. That being said, a lot of the dependencies that we have are based on other agencies. So they need to understand what we need, state being a really good example, DHS probably in some other cases as well. Coast Guard, how do we bring them in, and so on. So that's something that we haven't necessarily explored to date, but it is on our radar as we expand, how do we show the dependencies to policies and so on across the department. So we don't necessarily have an answer for you. We are very much focused on how we need to accomplish our missions today with the resources we control. But going forward, that's really a question that keeps coming up. So we're working to address it. How about that?
So Jaime, you might have actually already answered this,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I didn't hear it. So the challenge for moving from, is it UPDM?
No, so actually what we're using is pure SysML. Oh,
Okay,
what
you're
you mean,
using
department.
SysML with stereotypes that make it look like
Right.
DODAF or UAF.
No, they're using pure UAF now.
Oh, I thought you were you said you could not move to UAF yet.
No, sorry. No. We are using UAF today. It's just that the question that he asked, how are we working with other agencies?
Gotcha, okay.
We are not necessarily doing that, but UAF is going to facilitate.
I thought you sure are faking it well, so okay.
No, we are using that, yeah. All right. Well, thank you, folks.